Welcome back to Up Close. So what does it mean to be the first of something? You know, the first black president, the first female fill in the blank. There is, of course, a sense of history in all of it. But how does it define the person who has that job, who still has a job to do in the present tense? Our next guest is a first, an important one in the history of New York City, Corey Johnson, the first New York City Council Speaker, who is HIV positive. You have a big agenda, Mr. Speaker. You've outlined it. But it does have that asterisk, you know, the first HIV positive speaker of the Council of the City of New York. How does that define you?
Well, thank you for having me on, and thanks for asking the question. You know, I am 35 years old, so I was born in 1982. And my childhood, I heard a little bit about the HIV and AIDS epidemic. I remember watching the movie Philadelphia with my mom and my aunt. Tom Hanks starred and Denzel Washington. And I moved to New York at 19 years old. During a routine physical examination when I was 22, I found out that I was HIV positive. And me being elected to the council in 2013 and now being speaker, I don't want to sound too sentimental or hokey, but I really stand on the giants of the folks who came before me, people who put their lives and bodies on the line to get drugs from the CDC and NIH. There was a whole generation of gay men who were lost and who got active to try to save the community and get life-saving medication. I stand on their shoulders. Former State Senator Tom Duane, who held this council seat.
And something of a mentor to you, right?
Mentor to me. He came out about his HIV status in the late 80s. So I am deeply honored. And HIV and AIDS is now actually a disease of socioeconomic status, primarily communities of color. I take my job very seriously in ensuring that everyone gets the treatment support they need and deserve.
The other hard truth is that if this had been you 25 or 30 years ago, you might not have survived.
Absolutely. I probably wouldn't have survived. Most people didn't. And there is still stigma today around talking about HIV, but it was much harder in the late 80s and 90s when there were no life-saving medications. So for someone like Tom Duane and someone like Larry Kramer and many other people that fought the good fight, I am here today. I'm probably alive today because of the work that they did.
It's interesting because there are a lot of, obviously, gay people, gay activists who died from this, and you're saying you stand on their shoulders. But it really took a celebrity, Magic Johnson, to change the world about this.
That's right. When he talked about it being someone who was not identified with the gay community, and when he was so open about it, it was a crystallizing seminal moment in opening up the conversation in a bigger way to broader swaths of America. You have someone like Rock Hudson, who was so ashamed of his HIV status and who died. You had Elizabeth Taylor, who became a major voice at AmFAR. These people played a very critical role.
So thank you for being honest about it, and thank you for explaining that, because I think that's a part of your backstory. But you have an agenda. You have a big to-do list, and I want to get into the weeds on some of this. Let's start first, though, by this week. You came out strongly after your first couple days in office, and you criticized the New York Police Department, the way they handled the arrests of 18 people at an immigration rights protest the other day in Manhattan, including 2 city councilmen. You went after the New York Police Department fairly hard. Do you think they overreacted?
I think there was an overreaction, not amongst all the officers. It was really the agitation, and the reason why I think things got riled up were actually the Federal Protective Service agents from the Department of Homeland Security coming out of Federal Plaza. There were officers I believe went over the line and acted inappropriately and got too aggressive. We need to ensure that peaceful protests and constructive law enforcement that does not harm anyone, that those things can coexist. We're living in a perilous, anxiety-ridden time with things that are happening internationally and nationally. New York needs to remain a place where peaceful protests can continue to happen.
And in fact, Commissioner O'Neill, the NYPD, said he's going to review the tape and see how they did react. What's your relationship like with the police department?
I think Commissioner O'Neill is a great commissioner. I really admire him. I think he's done a tremendous job. We saw the lowest homicide rate numbers since 1951 in the last year. Crime is at an all-time low, and that is because of the men and women of the NYPD. The vast majority of police officers do a great job and work well in the community. But when certain officers get too aggressive and out of line, we need to ensure that they are not above the law. They have to act appropriately when they interact connect with New Yorkers.
It was, of course, the last few years, fairly tense and controversial time with the NYPD, the Eric Garner case. His daughter just buried this past week.
I was at her funeral in Harlem.
And what was your position in the Garner case when you were a member of the council back then?
Well, I mean, Eric Garner said many times that he couldn't breathe. And he was a man who was in his community, and, you know, the interaction like that with a police officer should never end in someone losing their life. The Garner family has seen so much loss with Eric Garner and Erica Garner, but also I believe they've been able to turn some of it into a crusade for social justice, and so I'm proud of their family.
Going forward, what's your relationship right now with the mayor?
It's a good relationship. I mean, I have said to him during the course of the speaker's race and over the last 2 weeks that we are going to be a co-equal, separate, independent branch of government. But I'm going to be constructive with him. I am results-oriented. I want to get things done. There are many big issues, whether it be the subway system, the affordability crisis, the number of people who are homeless in New York City, small businesses being shuttered all over the city. There's a lot to tackle. We can do that when we work together. When we disagree, it's not going to be personal, but we are going to be a well-respected, separate, independent branch of government, and I will not flinch, and I will not hesitate to speak out to protect our charter-mandated authority.
Sounds like you're having lunch together a few times. What was his reaction when you said that?
He was in the city council for 8 years, and when he was there, he was a very strong voice against Mayor Bloomberg. He chaired the General Welfare Committee. He looked into instances of children losing their lives in New York City, and he was strong on that issue. He understands our role. I think he respects it. His role has changed. He's the executive. We have certain authority that we're going to use: oversight authority, budgetary authority, land use authority, and legislative authority. We're going to use it. He may not always love it, but we're going to do our job in a respectful way, and we're going to remain independent.
This is a very complicated city, a diverse city with a myriad of problems. If you had to say what's the main problem you want to fix, you listed several issues that are, you know, top of the agenda. What's the most important issue? The
most important issue is the affordability crisis, which touches all the other issues. The reason why you have so many people in the homeless shelter tonight, over 60,000, 25,000 of whom are children, is because New York City is becoming less and less affordable. The cost of rent going up, subway fare costs going up while service standards go down, the cost of goods going up. Everything's going up while New Yorkers' wages have remained stagnant or gone down. We need to ensure our city remains an affordable place. I moved here at 19 years old with 2 bags, knowing 2 people, and I somehow was able to survive. It is much harder 17 years later for a 19-year-old who does not come from a family with wealth to be able to do that. We cannot lose the creative capital of New York City to places like Pittsburgh and Detroit because of an affordability crisis.
All of that, of course, takes a lot of money. We got an $86 or so billion budget already, but it takes a lot of money to solve these kinds of problems. The Trump tax plan is going to cut some of the benefits that New Yorkers had under the tax plan, and their taxes will go up. That's going to affect your tax revenues.
It absolutely is. We are still analyzing what the exact effect will be. 1.3 million New Yorkers last year took the state and local tax deduction, which ended up being $36 billion that folks were able to itemize.
They won't have that money.
They won't have that money, so we have to think about whether we can shift some of this to payroll taxes, which is a deductibility expense, but we're going to have to make very difficult decisions. We put money away the past few years in a rainy day fund for when the downturn was coming. The downturn is about to be here. So we're going to have to make very difficult decisions on how we spend our money, given the enormous issues that our city faces.
We have 30 seconds left. I could talk to you for 30 minutes. What's it like? What's the difference being the city council speaker versus just only being one of 51 council people? You have guards now, you have security, you have people to drink your water for you. Not really. But you do have this enormous staff and a budget, and you had a half a dozen people as a city councilman.
The weirdest thing is the police detail, the detectives that are with me. They are wonderful people. I am getting to know them, and they are great. But I'm not just saying this, Bill. I feel the same. I don't feel any different. I feel honored and privileged and lucky. There's a big responsibility, but also a lot of opportunity. I want to make our city a better place. And my mantra is, do the most good for the people who need it the most.
You come back on the show?
Whenever you want.
Maybe have a little more energy next time.
Okay.
Council Speaker Corey Johnson.